Good day. Here we are. It is Wednesday, September 9th. We're already in September. And today we have got an incredible episode. We're weighing in on the discussion on whether or not marketing is an expense or an investment. So we're going to talk about what numbers you need to understand and the strategies you need to do to fundamentally succeed in this. And if you're struggling with that question or you're looking to justify your ROI, you're going to want to pay attention to today's episode. So stay tuned. We'll see you guys in a second. Doug, how's it going?
Oh, I am excited for today. This is my favorite topic.
I know it's your favorite topic because I know how worked up you got about this, and the number of conversations that we've had with clients around this over the last couple weeks is kind of mind-boggling. And I thought it's time to dive into this because it's such a heated debate, it seems like, when you talk with people about things, and until they understand again what they're actually really looking at, the light bulb moment like kind of comes on for people.
And the definition of marketing in itself,
Before
we talk about is it an investment or is it an expense, there isn't actually a clear definition of what marketing is. There's different sources that have input, but I think the biggest problem is most people just don't even understand what marketing is for their business. So if you ask them, is it a marketing expense or is it an investment? They need to take a step back and look at like, okay, what are we really trying to accomplish? And one of the most frustrating things for me, like with all the measurement tools we have available today, marketing should be investment. It should be treated the same way you look at stocks, because you can evaluate almost every metric to make an educated decision on where and how that money returns.
100%, and I stand by that statement wholeheartedly. But I think where a lot of people get confused or they don't realize it's an investment is because, again, they've just simply have failed to look at the right numbers. And the right numbers we talk about are cost per lead, customer acquisition costs, lifetime value of a customer. I don't know if people are actually have the pencil sharpened enough to track all those things to adequately put an ROI on said advertising or marketing things, whether it's an event, whether it's traditional marketing, whether it's digital marketing. I just simply don't think people are that fine-tuned onto what they've done. They only see, again, like what their expense report on the P&L sheet, what the expenses have been for exhibiting at a trade show or traditional advertising, digital marketing, all that stuff. It's just viewed at expenses because I think the window that they're viewing that isn't even indicative of the entire life cycle of the sales process for their product or service. And I think we've touched on this a couple of times with our interview. But today, again, I think just to boil it down like simplistically is we want to help temper expectations so that way you could better understand how marketing works, what are the strategies you need to deploy fundamentally, again, to make sure that you're seeing the entire sales cycle for your marketing efforts, not just portions. And then just understanding again, like that this isn't a flash in the pan, just because you run an ad or you do something isn't going to spur all these sales, all these leads, all these conversions. You have to understand that it's an entire journey and it's a relationship building that you're doing with prospects and customers and existing customers, right?
I think one of the biggest things that you just hit the nail on the head with is people don't look at the complete journey. And they tend to be in two camps. One, they get so locked into the numbers. Or two, they just don't look at the numbers at all. And I find that doing it properly is somewhere in the middle of understanding how much it costs to acquire a lead, how much it costs to acquire a customer, and then understanding that lifetime value. With that being said, I think exactly what you said, they don't look at how long it takes for somebody to become a customer. And I know we touched on it last week with cookies expiring and how some of the tracking and data is going to change. But if you're in B2B, you have to have some type of mechanism or system to understand and be able to measure how long does it take us to actually land a net new customer. And most people have the tendency to skew that data, to try to like undercut it, or they're going to exclude some cost, or they're going to take it from when that person became a warm lead. But they don't realize they actually saw this person maybe at 2 trade shows, or they've attended 3 or 4 webinars. And the problem I start to see that then evolves in marketing is people get down to this single tactic. Like, hey, we're going to run a webinar funnel, or hey, we're going to do this one campaign. But most clients probably require 7 to 9 touch points. So if you're judging the success of marketing based off a single campaign or a single tactic, knowing full well that's one of many things that need to happen, well, it's always going to look like marketing's an expense, not an investment. And we see that with trade shows.
Yep. Yeah, and again, all that stuff, all these touch points you're creating, again, just because you're doing it on various platforms, various events, various channels, all that is going to compound and build ultimately to higher conversion rates in the end, because you've created so many opportunities to, one, create impressions, but also opportunities for discussions to happen when the customer's ready. And that's why, again, why it's important to kind of be out there. And that's I think, the equivalent of salespeople being out there, being on the phones, meeting with prospects. This is just something, again, that I've said numerous times that you can just do at scale from the convenience of your home or office now, because, again, COVID and travel restrictions and whatever else is out there, this is the way to stay in front of your audience and top of mind, and you build that brand awareness, which ultimately leads into some sort of consideration, ultimate conversion to be a customer or a client, or they refer you to somebody within their network, because that's the beauty kind of online and social stuff, is that, people tend to be kind of tribal and want to be a part of what people like and take interest in. And if you're creating value and you're creating awesome content, that stuff is going to be out there and it's going to be shared amongst those circles. And that's where, again, you start to realize, holy cow, this is really working. We're getting more exposure than we ever did via trade show, via magazine, whatever, where, again, those are just flashes in the pan, in my opinion, because they're once every so often these events that happen. But now, again, you're able to do it at scale, which is far more efficient, far more effective, to set you up for success when it comes to a trigger event like an event or trade show or conference.
The one caveat I would say to that, like, those elements are part of the customer experience, but I find that they're often out of place. Like, somebody walking by the trade show booth, you just handed him a $25 brochure, where that person may not even be qualified. Whereas somebody closer to the buying decision on the process, having that mailed with a personal note attached, could be one of those pieces that actually helps with the conversion. But there's a lot of misalignment in where and what tools they're using, and figuring out how do we sequence our marketing in the right order, and then measuring the effectiveness of it to make sure that we're getting the return. But most people haven't taken the time to just sit down and plan out, what do we want this journey to look like, and what are the assets we need to do. And I know, like, to give some background to the audience and the listeners, the reason this came up is Chris and I were talking yesterday, because a lot of times we have people reach out and said, hey, I only have $500 for this campaign. What would we do? And that goes back to that fundamental of getting away from just single campaign thinking and being more strategic about where does that money fit in. Because that same dollar, I had someone reach out to me yesterday, they have over 24,000 impressions per month coming to their site. So that's a case, like, if you're looking at how to spend, you'd want to put that money close to transaction where you're running retargeting ads. But they haven't looked at the whole journey to figure out, okay, where do I need to invest my money? What problems do I have to solve in which order? And for most people, there are benchmarks available to help you assemble a budget to reach your goal. But to approach a campaign saying, hey, I need this and I only have this, I think you have a lot of misalignment between what's realistic. And it needs to get to a point where you have to manage those expectations carefully to understand, like, hey, if you want to capture this, there's a way to reverse engineer this to see if that's even reasonable. And I know the one tool that I always go back to all the time, which we'll throw in the show notes, WordStream produces both Google and Facebook benchmarks. So those can be used as just quick litmus tests to say, hey, with this budget, and the goal I have, let's say I need 1,000 leads, do I have enough to actually accomplish that goal in my industry?
Yeah.
Or am I going to misuse these funds?
And those benchmarks, again, Doug's referring to, we'll put them in the show notes, but on WordStream, again, some of the performance benchmarks that they look at are your CTR, which are your click-through rate, your cost per click, your average conversion rate, and then your average cost per action. And those actions, again, can vary. They can mean submitting a form, giving contact information, downloading some sort of pamphlet or ebook. Those actions all vary, but those are really the 4 actions that we look at least on Facebook, and the same thing happens again on Google Ads too. But what we wanted to kind of do is show kind of that correlation again in the expectations of what you're looking at and what you should spend and look for as far as results when it comes through various of those goals. Because when you ultimately, again, you want these different actions counterbalance. They have different counterbalance and actions to each one. So while you might have a low click-through rate, you might have a much higher conversion rate at the end because, again, you've had a compounding effect of impressions. But again, we'll break that down further in a little bit thing. But Doug, I want to get through to talk about, again, like average click-through rates by industry. And for our industry, I'll say, B2B is probably the most appropriate fit for this. And that we see that the B2B click-through rates on Facebook is actually not that good. It's 0.8%, so 0.8% on that. And what we know is that it's struggling to get these high quality impressions that you're struggling with because, again, there's just a lot of B2B, I think, traffic that you're fighting with similar services. So how do you create better content? But how do you get something compelling enough for somebody to click through on that ad to take them further into the journey? What would you say to more about the click-through rate and how to help that on people when they do ads?
Well, I think a lot of that actually goes to picking the right platform. I mean, Facebook is a business-to-business, or Facebook's a social platform. So if you were to look at some of the other categories in that same thing, like beauty, for example, the click-through rate in beauty when you get to those is almost double.
Yeah.
Same in retail. Retail is double that. If you were to go over to Google and start to look at the click-through rates, the average CTR in Google search for B2B is 2.4. It's almost 3 times Facebook.
Yeah.
So the numbers may seem shockingly low. It's just the exposure. Anything above 1.5% is really good. But I think a big part of it comes down to picking the right platform and understanding where is my audience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those leading indicators to say, like, hey, okay, my audience is, if I were B2B and I looked at those 2 benchmarks, this is the same way you would buy a stock. Like, if I'm investing in the market, I want to know that I'm going to have a better return. And my click-through rate's the first indicator. That's the first thing to say, hey, like, if I'm picking between stock A and stock B, well, obviously, this one has 3 times better performance.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to invest my money over here. So for B2B, especially when it comes to cold traffic, I'm probably not going to start on Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm going to use that as retargeting.
And what you see is, again, because on Google, it's more of an organic search. It's more deliberate. So that's why, again, those click-through rates are much higher on those platforms because people are actively searching for that. Whereas somebody may have catch glimpse or become aware of you via Facebook, again, that's not necessarily going to be where they check you out. But if they see you enough and you're providing enough value, again, and enough content out there that when they do need to do whatever it is you offer, now they're going to go to Google and search, and now you rank or you have Google Ads, something in there. That's, again, now where you see, again, that kind of adverse effect, again, these counterbalance measures, where on Google, you have a much higher click-through rate now because, again, it's you've created enough of impressions over time now to lead them to click on you. There's a familiarity there with you.
I do want to caveat that there are nuances to every platform, and some industries are way more expensive than others. But if you have to compare one versus the other, looking at click-through rate and benchmarks there is a good decision. It can be compounded, though, when if, for example, if I look at the actual cost per click from Google, when you get down to, like in the B2B space, you're $3. And if I go down to Facebook, you're $2. So I may get more clicks, but those clicks may be more expensive. So you start to have to look at how much more am I going to have to spend on what platforms. If I put LinkedIn in there, we have campaigns where we have some clicks that are $23, $24. So you have to look at what am I trying to accomplish and almost back into it and understand what platforms is my audience on? How much is it going to cost to get them to do something?
It got a little, your connection there got a little bumbled for a second. Can you repeat that last thing, Doug?
The best number to look at is going to be that cost per lead, because that's going to be your most true indicator. The things like cost, the click-through rate and your cost per click, those are indicators we often use for optimizing campaigns. But at the end of the day, it may net out at your actual cost per lead. And then ultimately from there, you start to look at what is the lifetime value. So, but the most important thing is very few people are even looking at these numbers at all.
Yeah.
Like they don't actually dig in and say, okay, where and what platforms perform the best? Which generating the best leads? All of these things are fairly easy to track now.
Well, and along with that too, Doug, again, not knowing actually what their cost per lead is. So like, I think you'd mentioned when we started the show, like if somebody wants 1,000 leads, right? All those cost for impressions, the click-through rates, all that stuff, all leads up to eventually, again, if you've sequenced and have done your ads and your content appropriately, should generate a lead out of that or filtered its way somewhere along the line of the journey. So if you need, again, 1,000 leads and let's say your cost per lead is, let's say $20, again, the 1,000 times 20, you're looking at $20,000 there for your advertising budget. Now that's where you start to, again, now you weigh it against how much does it cost to do alternative types of marketing or advertising, in be it trade show, traditional advertising, etc. You've got to be, again, really deliberate now, and I think even more so it's important and that you're able to track every single step along that way. So if you think that, again, you get exposure to at a trade show or an event to, let's say, 1,000, that 1,000 people, is it 1,000 people that have actually been through kind of your journey and that they're a qualified lead, or is it just, you're counting them as a lead because they stopped by the booth and you talked to them for a second and, they just really wanted the giveaway or whatever snack or beverage you had at the booth that day? Do you really know that, or have you been tracking that? We don't know. And that's where I think a lot of the disconnect happens, where sales teams get a whole bunch of leads from the marketing team and say, God, these leads were garbage. Well, I don't think that there was enough filters and there wasn't enough tracking in there to map out that journey to actually say, yes, these are actual qualified leads for what we have to offer, not just, general people that are passing by, stopping to look.
And they lock down metrics like a sales qualified lead, like a marketing qualified lead, sales qualified lead, and they have different scoring mechanisms. So when you get into more advanced tracking and doing lead scoring and everything, like that type of path, like all these metrics help. But I would say for the most part, people at least need to start the process and look at some of the more base foundational numbers. Like, what did it cost to get us traffic? How much did it cost to get attention to our site? And for the most part, a lot of businesses will struggle with getting people to their site to even tell their story or getting people to their content. So they're going to be solving a traffic problem first, which is generally an awareness problem.
Yep. Top of funnel.
Most often when they get there, that's when they look at SEO. A decent SEO company is going to cost roughly $1,500. So you're going to spend somewhere between $9,000 to $18,000 to get ranked, just to get traffic.
Yep.
But a lot of people, they may not pull that into the marketing budget and say, hey, where are we receiving this term, or how do we measure that to confirm or put that into our cost per lead? Just because all of a sudden now you rank, and you also have to pay to stay there. Like, it's not like you can just shut SEO off and you're going to be there forever. You have to keep that engine going. Whereas that same $9,000, what we just said, if the cost per lead was $20, we could have gotten, what's that,
1,800. Yeah.
Sorry, 108 leads. So understanding what you're doing and how to move the investment around to yield similar results is the next thing. So if they get the traffic, they may have a conversion problem. Hey, we're getting a lot of people to our site, but they're not calling us or they're not filling out the form. And that's where you start to look at, do I need to update my site? Do I need to be sending them to a landing page that addresses their problem? Right? Or do I have the wrong audience?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of signals in marketing that will tell you when something's off that I think a lot of people ignore.
For sure.
But when they make the mindset shift from seeing as it just an expense, well, we had to be at the show because our competitors are there.
Yep.
Like, oh, we have to produce this brochure because we have to maintain our brand. I would argue that I would be looking at that to say, like, is that a smart use, or can we use that better to get the result we're trying to work towards? And I would just make the mindset shift of getting away from the expense mindset and thinking of it as an investment.
Mm-hmm. And Ashley, she just mentioned, she said it's so difficult to qualify the wide net of trade show leads. And she says it's absolutely essential to qualify roles and etc. And this is where I think attribution comes into play, which again helps get a lot of these metrics done right. Because, again, for example, I keep pulling this up, like, these ads that you see in these nice shiny glossy magazines, like, for example, like, big shiny jet. And it says, hey, come to our homepage, or, send a generic email to a normal email address. There's no attribution. There's no tracking. So you don't know if your thing really works. And then if you're running a specific type of ad, you can start to segment your customers. And this is how you can start to qualify these leads that come in. Because if you know somebody is coming to look at a specific service or product, you can serve them up the next message specific to that service or product instead of just generic messaging campaigning, where now the user experience drops off because it's not what they've come to expect. And that way, again, if you know they're engaging with that next piece of content, they've moved further down the funnel from a sales qualified or market qualified lead to a sales qualified lead. And now that's probably the time that, your sales team needs to be picking up the phone, or you're sending out, now you send out that nice $25 brochure or whatever you can do to get that customer going, oh, wow, these guys really understand me. They really get me. That's where now you look at the entire journey and things get really, really good when it comes to ROI, because now, again, you've been able to attribute that journey from awareness to consideration, again, to a conversion. That's the part, I think, fundamentally, again, that people really need to dial in on. And it's more important now that, again, we don't have the ability to have tens of thousands of people at a trade show. But even then, again, you're still competing against everybody else that's offering a similar product or service at the same trade show with you. Again, how do you stand out? A lot of it's pre-marketing leading up to the events, right? And again, a lot of this can be done with tracking and tools and conversion tools, because your marketing strategy, like stocks, again, it's always kind of dynamic. Again, you have your long-term investments, yes. You have your steady eddies, absolutely. But you have to be able to reallocate budgets depending on what the market is doing. And that's the way, again, I think you should look at your marketing strategy, your platforms, your channels. But if none of that works unless, again, you're understanding the numbers and the goals that are tied to that, because it's counterbalance action and counterbalance metrics. There's always an equilibrium you got to find in there, and what are you appropriate? What's your risk tolerance, if we want to take it back to a stock term? What's your risk tolerance to be able to do that, to acquire, again, or to reach that goal that you want to reach with your marketing budget or marketing goals?
See, the one thing I always have found interesting, and I think there's...
Oh, you froze on me there, Doug.
What's that?
You froze on me there for a second.
Am I good now?
Yeah, you're good.
That was just for effect. I wasn't. There's one systemic issue I find in marketing that makes some of this challenging. And I think it has to do, like, if you get into bigger companies where they have a CMO and their lead cycle may be 18 months, but the average CMO tenure is 6 months.
6 months.
So you have essentially 3 sets of marketing strategies come through before a full customer will go through. So sitting down, like, as a leadership team and understanding, like, we are in this for the long game. And we really need to figure out, how do we understand our customer acquisition cost? And if you can really understand your customer acquisition cost combined with the lifetime value, that's when you can start to do really cool, really creative things. And you can get away from just trying to have a fishbowl where they get an Apple Watch or an iPad. Because if you really understand your customer's value and how much they're worth to you as a company and how much they cost, chances are there's a lot of companies that could afford to actually send their customers an Apple Watch.
Yeah.
Because they're paying $1,000 to acquire a customer anyways. So instead of having to worry about huge marketing campaigns, they could be really strategic about the clients they really want to work with and just be hyper dedicated and create those customer experiences that start the conversations. You know, a friend of ours is doing the same thing with the brewery industry.
Yep.
But like, direct mail is a very underutilized tool. But if you have that hot list of clients, I would start to look at, how can we understand how much it costs to acquire, and how do we be really specific and create an experience that's level to or equal to the product or service we provide.
Exactly. Now you're almost sounding like account-based marketing.
Yeah.
ABM.
You know what? It's in the right industries. That's why when it's done properly, it works.
It works. Yep.
But if you're not in that, like, where you have that list of customers, then you just need to be smarter. And still, the same rules apply. It's just more often that experience is more of a content experience.
Yeah. Well, and again,
they need to learn the numbers.
It all starts with building a list, driving traffic, continuing to serve up the right messaging, the right content to drive them further down the funnel, ultimately, again, to a conversion. If it's filling out a form, is it a demo? Is it a facility tour? Who knows what it is? I mean, each company is going to be specific for their business. But that's, again, where you understand what is my customer journey? What do I have to do when I sell them? And then, again, knowing that you can absolutely track this along every step of the way to know and justify and validate your investment. Because now, again, there's a sequence, there's a process for you Canadians that like saying that. There's literally a process. You know, you can't get from point A to point D without B and C. You know, you just can't jump these phases. And I think, again, what most people fail to do is to have that systematic process of moving through the funnel. It's always point A or point D. You know, they just want to jump to the ultimate end state and forget all the things that have to happen in between there. And again, that stuff that has to happen doesn't necessarily have to be face to face. You can do things online. You can send, direct mail. But until you know, again, specifically who that audience is and what they're looking for, you're going to continue to waste money by shotgunning these efforts into the wide open air, and hopefully you hit something. Whereas this way, specifically, hey, I know prospect X has gone through these pieces of content. They've engaged with us at these different levels. Now is the time to really engage again with a highly curated, highly customized experience. And that, again, is now where your conversion rate should be exponential.
Yep. I would tell you, one of the biggest and most expensive mistakes I see most companies make is they come out of the gates running some type of conversion or lead campaign. And
it's a cold traffic. It's a cold traffic. Running a conversion campaign or an ad campaign against cold traffic could be expensive. It's a war of attrition at that point.
It's really expensive. It's deadly. And one of the things I see that compounds it is they haven't often tested or validated the product or that lead offer. Like if you're going to run a campaign to something that you want to convert, you better make sure you've tested if that actual thing converts and people want to buy it. Because the worst thing you want to do is run cold traffic to something that they know nothing about. It is just a recipe to just burn budgets.
100%. So, well, that's, I mean, I feel like we could go on this subject rather than maybe we'll break it down further, kind of step by step again through that journey for people. We'll go through the journey, I think, next time, because I think I know we get a lot of questions like, what should a customer journey look like, right? I think next time we'll run you guys through that so you can see again where the journeys are, where the pitfalls are in your sales cycle, I guess, that you, or your marketing cycle. And that way you could understand, hey, this is where I should probably have my priorities to bring up, that level, to not have a deficit here or a pitfall here. So that way, again, that journey is more linear and not, peaks and valleys of things, which I think, again, we tend to chase, oh my God, this is working. Let's keep pumping more into that. And next thing you know, you've got a negative ROI because, again, there's only so much of those like hot flashes that you can pick up without, again, bringing up other audiences to that level. So I think we'll do that next time. But if in the meantime, again, let us know what you think if marketing is an investment or an expense, where you guys had the greatest success in doing things. Or if it's about the journey and you want your customer journey help mapped, again, Doug and I are here to help you understand that, because again, until you understand that and you have a plan of action, you have a flight plan as we coin it, you don't really know where you're going. You don't know what directions you need to go, and it's very confusing, and it's very hard to convey, that value proposition to your employers, to your bosses, to shareholders, etc. But again, having a plan of action is absolutely critical to the success of that, where everybody can have the transparency and see this is what we're doing to move the needle, and again, now actually realize an ROI. So
awesome, Chris. This was a fun one.
This is fun. I feel like, again, we could have gone off on a tangent for a long time, so I was trying to pull back the reins a little bit and not go into that, because again, we want to keep these in bite-sized episodes. But like I said, stay tuned next week, everybody. We'll go a little bit more into the different segments of the customer journey. Actually, we'll probably break down how it fits into the sales funnel, the top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. I think that'll help people conceptualize and visualize more what we've been talking about. So stay tuned next week, all, and we'll see you again soon. Be sure to follow us and like us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And did we get the website finished, Doug? I know that we keep saying that.
She's ready.
She's ready. All right, we'll push that out and we'll put that all in the show notes. So we'll see you guys again next week. Take care and be safe.